Well, talk about a gift. Yeah. Um, Dr. Sarbmeet Kanwal, coming to us from Jersey, Holmdel, Jersey. And I will just read the blurb from the Horn. Uh, and it's probably not an accident that we structured this coming out of the magnificence of Brian Berman's work and an exploration of that, because as has gone this World Unity Week, it seems one miracle begets the next. And what we wrote on the Trello board page is that the Horn Antenna is a magnificent structure atop a hill in Holmdel, New Jersey, where humanity made its first direct encounter with its source. In 1964, two intrepid astronomers used this antenna to detect radiation left over from the explosive beginning of our universe. When recently this hallowed ground was sold to a developer to erect condominiums on it, a small group of determined citizens banded together to save the historic site for future generations to enjoy. This conversation is about why this place holds so much meaning for our future and how such courageous actions by concerned citizens can change the course of humanity. And Sarbmeet, you travel. What I respect about you so much is you travel the worlds of science and spirit as with equal respect. And it's a rare scientist who can do that. It's a rare spiritualist who can do that. And I think there are just a handful of people on the planet who understand that it's the same thing. And since we're talking here about the transformation of our existing paradigms and narratives, right? And I know you from deep time exploration, and you're a man who certainly with your skill sets could show up in any room and be applauded. And you easily shed the layer of your successes from yesterday as a physicist and an astronomer and a scientist and a right. And it doesn't mean we don't pick those tools back up again, but I love the way we used to call it dancing in the conversation. The growth and development program I was part of years back, they called it dancing in the conversation. You do that wonderfully. So welcome.
Thank you, Tom. Um, you know, since we've been together in a few shows or sessions like this, I have to say that you really have a way with introductions. Thank you so much for saying all those wonderful things. I think I'd be happy if I'm deserving even 1/10 of those, but thank you anyway. So we're here today to talk about the horn antenna. I have in the past suggested that the horn antenna is a, a site for pilgrimage, much like people go to sacred places to revisit and be inspired by those historical events that created a revelation in various traditions. Um, and and many of us feel that the horn antenna um, is a place very much like that. But Hasina, when I spoke with her about this, suggested something even grander. And I've been very inspired by what she said. She said it's not just a human pilgrimage site, the horn antenna is a cosmic pilgrimage site. And I think that's a really wonderful idea because it was not just that us humanity made connection with our source at this place. But in a sense, we are providing a gateway for anybody, and I mean even beyond humanity, to be inspired by this particular location and site. I mean, in my own mind, I was even thinking about aliens, visiting the Earth and perhaps making sure that they went to visit the Horn Antenna because that is where at least one intelligent species had been able to make that connection. So, before I say a whole lot more, let me show you a picture of the antenna. I think most people of here must have seen it before, but I'd just like to put it up so that you have an idea about what is this magnificent piece of equipment that I've been talking about. So let me see if I can share my screen. So here it is. Let me see if you can see this. Okay. So this is me standing in front of the horn antenna. You can see that it's a fairly large piece of equipment. It's about 20 feet across and pretty heavy in terms of it's made of aluminum and steel. And the way it stands, you can also get an idea about how it can twist and turn. It can either go around so that it can point in any direction in the sky, and it can also horizontally move a full circle 360 degrees. So that literally gives it the freedom to pick any spot and to focus on receiving whatever radiation might be that might be coming from that area. So this piece of equipment happens to be um, very close to where I live. I would say maybe 3 miles or something like that. It stands atop a hill, in fact, the highest point in my county. And and it is the history of what happened here that I'm going to be talking about today. And I would welcome participation from the audience and any questions that you might have. So before I move on, and let me now stop my sharing here. Here we go. Um, One of the people that have spoken most eloquently about the horn antenna is Brian Swim. And so before I say a whole lot more, I want to do a couple of quick readings from a couple of different books that he has written where he talks about it. The first reading that I'm going to do for you is from his book called The Universe is a Green Dragon. Here we go. And it's a beautiful dialogue between two individuals, a, um, a visionary, obviously, that is named Thomas here, and a youth who is very eager to learn about what knowledge Thomas can impart to him. So here's a little excerpt from that book. All that we see about us, all that now exists, was there at the beginning, in that great burning explosion of light. And the youth asks, how do we know about it? Thomas, well, we can see it. We can see the light from the primeval fireball, or at least the light from its edge, for it burned for nearly 1,000,000 years. We can see the dawn of the universe because the light from its edge reaches us only now, after traveling 14 billion years to get here. Youth, we can see the actual light from the fireball? Thomas, when you see a candle's flame, you see the light from the candle. In that sense, we see the fireball. We are able to interact physically with photons from the beginning of time. So we're in direct contact with the origin of the universe? Thomas, that's right. Youth, I can't believe that I didn't know this. Thomas, scientists have only just learned to see the fireball. The light has always been there, but the ability to respond to it required a tremendous development of the human senses. Just as an artist learns to see a lakeshore's subtle shades and contours, the human race learns to develop its sensitivities to what is present. It took millions of years to develop, but humans can now interact with the cosmic radiation from the origin of the universe. We can now see the beginning of time. What a stupendous achievement. I think that's a great explanation of the significance of the horn antenna and what it means, not just for humanity, but for the whole of cosmos itself. And here's one other little excerpt from another book that Brian Swim has very recently published. It's called Cosmogenesis. And in this book, it's like a autobiography and or an autocosmology, as he puts it. And it talks a lot about how he himself encountered various aspects of the cosmos and his knowledge about it during his life. So here he talks about an opportunity that he had while traveling in New Jersey to actually be able to touch the horn antenna. And so here is what he says. When we arrived at Bell Labs, I was stunned by its size. An enormous, elegant black cube growing out of the New Jersey farmland. He's talking now about the building, that is next to the horn antenna, where all the research was done, and where I personally have worked for many, many years. Hundreds of offices stacked on top of each other made four solid walls of black, looking out at the universe. As we approached, it grew in size. I became even more dazzled by the thought of actually touching the radio telescope, where the cosmic background radiation first entered human awareness. It was in this building that cosmogenesis was established as scientific fact. In the future, it would be called, and this is his terminology, it would be called the Bethlehem of the new cosmic story. We would talk about this pilgrimage the rest of our lives, telling our sons over and over again how they had seen the telescope that saw through the depths of time right back to the origin. So, what I would like to do now is to tell you a little bit about the science of where and how this radiation emerged, and also a little bit about the history of how the discovery was made, as I said in my introduction, by these two intrepid astronomers who got the Nobel Prize for that discovery. You know, many of you have heard the story of the Big Bang and the whole cosmic evolution. And I'm sure many of you have also heard a little bit about the horn antenna. So I decided to tell the story today in a different way. In fact, I don't think I've ever told the story in quite this way. A couple of things inspired me to think along these lines. One is the name of the convergence room that Hasina and Tom are leading. And that is, the earth as organism. So what I would like to position here with you is that it's not just the earth, but the whole universe that is organism. And so I'm going to tell the story from the point of view of the universe. Another thing that inspired me is a colleague of mine at Deep Time Networks, where I do a lot of the work. Her name is Kendra Kede, and she wrote this beautiful poem called Blowing Your Own Horn. And I actually wanted Kendra to accompany me to the session today because she had this deep, um, you know, almost spiritual feeling for the antenna. But she wasn't able to make it. And so I have her permission to actually show you a video of Kendra reciting this poem that I'm talking about. Now, the way that Kendra puts it, blowing your own horn, it's as if the universe gave rise to this horn antenna as a way to blow its horn, which means to tell about itself. And so this gave me an idea about a whole new way of thinking about the story of the horn antenna. So think of this as a story told in the old time tradition, where you sit in front of a fire and a storyteller, um, you know, basically relates and narrates a story to a group of people sitting around the fire. And I'm going to try and position it that way. So here's how the story starts. The story starts with the universe itself. What was the universe before we witness its physical manifestation in stars and galaxies and planets and life? What was it? Well, what science is telling us is that the universe was a very elegant, very abstract order, an order that if we as human beings, now that we have this facility with mathematics, when we look at that order, what we see is an incredible amount of beauty, an incredible amount of richness, which is enveloped in what mathematicians call symmetry. And that is what the universe had. But it also had this incredible potential and the power to become a physically manifested universe. In fact, not just one possible physically manifested universe, but hundreds of different kinds of physically manifested universes. And the universe thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if all this beauty, all this power, all this magnificence could be appreciated by a being in this universe that would bring back into the space of the universe the possibility of beholding its beauty with awe and wonder. And so the universe thought that it would create a manifestation, it would create a universe in which there would be beings, and these beings would be endowed with a kind of awe and wonder and curiosity that will lead them back to the universe with that awe and wonder. And so the universe thought it would create matter. When matter is created in this incredible flaring forth, with incredible amount of heat and intensity, the fireball. It turns out that the order that the universe possesses insists that there be a mixture of light and matter. However, the order insists also that there be antimatter in equal amounts. And so when the universe was first created, there was light, there was matter, there was antimatter in about equal proportions. But that wouldn't let the universe do what it intended to do, because as the universe cooled, the matter and the antimatter would annihilate each other, and all that you would be left with just light. But in order to make beings with the kind of intelligence and mind, you need more than light. And so the universe engineered a slight breakdown of this beautiful symmetry. It turns out that we now know that in the beginning, the universe had a tiny bit more matter than antimatter. As a matter of fact, for 10 billion particles of antimatter, there was 10 billion and one particles of matter, so that when the universe cooled, there was a small amount of matter left. There was a lot more light. There was 10 billion times more light than the matter, but it would be the matter that would then result in the beings that the universe needed to create. So what about the light? What would the universe do with this beautiful light? And the universe figured that the light would be the communication channel. It would be the way in which the universe would inform the beings after they are evolved in 14 billion years as to the presence of the universe, as to the presence of that incredible origin and beginning that led to it, led to the beings being there on that planet. And so that is what happened. When the matter particles came together to build atoms, this incredible amount of light that had been there in the beginning was released into the universe to travel at every nook and cranny to every corner of the universe, with the hope that some planet in some corner on some day, much, much later, would use that light to get informed about where the universe came from and where it arose. And this is indeed what has happened. The universe has manifested itself into galaxies, into stars. In fact, stars were a critical part of the universe, because it turns out that in the beginning, the universe only could make hydrogen and helium, but the stars allow the universe to come up with all those other elements that are necessary for life to exist. And the universe needed to create protected places where these molecules could come together and give rise to life. And that meant taking them far away from the harsh radiation of stars, and also putting them in a place where they're subjected to warmth, which doesn't exist in most of space, because space is very cold and dark and inky. And that was the planets. The planets have the place that can provide the protection for these molecules to come together. It has the ability to bring them together in its molten cores, and it has the ability to envelop itself with an atmosphere and liquid water, which are both essential elements for life to happen. And this is indeed what happened. And those beings that finally evolved from single cells had still that hunger, had still that desire, had still that want to go back into their universe, to understand their universe, to be able to appreciate the universe. And it comes across to us as our desire for awe and wonder, as our desire to connect in a spiritual way with that from which we came. So over these years, as human beings were starting to develop into communities, over those years, they started to want to understand their origin. And without the science, they initially created their own origin stories. From whatever they could find in their environment, they constructed stories out of that until this development of story after story led to the discovery of science, which then enabled technologies to sharpen, as Brian Swim says, the senses of these human beings in a way that they could start to perceive that light, which was always there. It had been there for the 4.5 billion years that life was evolving on the earth, but there was no wherewithal to detect it and to get the message that it was trying to send to us. But then it did happen. People began to understand with the discoveries of Einstein that indicated that our universe might not be stationary, that it might actually be expanding, which means that it could have an origin, which at that time was hard to digest because people always thought the universe to be just a steady state, always the same, always eternal. And then with these new telescopes, people like Hubble were actually able to show that the universe was indeed expanding. And then when people figured out what would happen if the universe was expanding, there were discoveries made that allowed people to see that there might be some radiation that was generated early on in the universe that might still be around, and hence started a search for that radiation. But that search would be full of obstacles, full of failed um, opportunities until two people, unbeknownst to themselves, they were not searching for this radiation at all. They had simply been given this antenna in Bell Labs that was built in order to facilitate satellite communications. That this antenna was not being used because new technologies had developed for that satellite communication. And Bell Labs invited these two astronomers to come and use the antenna for whatever research they were interested in. All they wanted to do was to look at the center of our galaxy to find out if there was some kind of radiation coming out from there, because that's what their calculations had indicated. But before they could even get to look at our galaxy, they saw this noise coming from the universe, which they could not understand what it was. And so they talked to everybody that came across to them to know if anybody had any idea what that was. And indeed, at one of the conferences, someone said, "Hey, go talk to that guy in Princeton. He has been talking about it. He might know something." And when they called that person, they said, "Oh my gosh, we're building something to detect this radiation. And it looks like you already have done it." And with that accident in 1964, we humans became aware of this incredible message coming from the beginning of the universe to tell us its story. And it's only after that that mainstream physicists started putting their faith in the Big Bang Theory and working out all of the details, which today stands in front of us as the cosmic story. A piece of knowledge, a revelation that is so significant, that tells us who we are, that tells us perhaps why we are here, and that informs us of maybe the meaning and purpose of the universe itself. So that is the story of the horn antenna. And I would love to take questions, and certainly would invite Asina and Tom um, to raise any thoughts. In fact, why don't I do that now? And then I'll make sure that I have some time left over um, to show you Kendra's beautiful video on the horn antenna. So let's pause here and see if there are any questions.
Brian, did you want to say something?
Thank you. Yes, I unmuted myself, and it's a pleasure to hear um, the depth of the understanding of the creative universe. I am a fine art sculptor and a meditator for over 50 years. And
Wow.
in my meditation one morning, I saw this spiraling torus geometry depicted behind me.
Mm.
And I began to show the design at different locations. And a number of physicists approached and said, "Why, you've modeled the creative pattern of the universe,"
Wow.
which dropped my jaw because I just saw it from a visual artist standpoint. And I had to create it. And so there was mathematics, there was symmetry, there was the perfection that had to come together in order to manifest this. But I want to share something that happened with a Shinto priest that saw my design, and he led our group. We were doing a healing of the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and he was representing the Japanese. And we were doing this healing ritual. And he said, "I will take you to the time before the Big Bang, which is where I go in my meditation each day. And I promise I will bring you back. I will bring you back. You're free to come, and we will cut all of our ties with this earth plane right now, and we'll just go back there energetically." So we went through this whole thing, and he's swinging swords, and it was really a beautiful ritual that he was creating for us to cut our ties to the conscious projection on this manifestation of the universe in our eyes. And then he came over to me because I was displaying my design, and he said, "You know, this is what I see before the Big Bang. That the energy of the universe was spiraling together and compressing all that is into the explosion of light and the creation of the yin and yang manifestation of everything. And I see that in your design."
Mm.
Now, I am not a scientist. I greatly appreciate everything that you have studied and embraced. And I am delighted to have attended so far to hear, because do you know and I shouldn't talk too long, but do you know the movie, The Theory of Everything?
Yes, I do.
And the search for the equation, yeah. And I watched that movie, and I said, I've created the equation in a sculpture. Now I'm a lay person. I'm an artist, but I feel so connected with your presentation and with other spiritual people and physicists, and how each of us is an instrument for somehow the divine to express itself and educate us on this amazing universe. So I'm going to pause because, I'm so happy that I stayed on to hear all of the research and the great scientists and the dedication that you have to this. And so I'm happy to have met you here. And what can I say? I called my creation Holos, and then I heard that David Bohm called the
Mm,
wholeness of the universe the holo movement.
mm, absolutely,
What
absolutely.
what amazing, like I'm entering in like from a child into a field that is phenomenal. So
If I
Thank you,
could jump
Brian.
in
Thank
and add
you
one
for sharing.
more, if I could jump in and add one more piece of data for you, Sarbmeet.
Sure, sure, sure.
Brian shared a great story about the fragility of glass, and as a teacher, and as you were describing the various matter antimatter relationships and the cooling of the universe and the elegant cooling of the universe, is there something about the metaphysics of matter that is a teacher or a quote accident as pointer, something like that?
A metaphysics of matter that is a teacher? Is that what you said?
Yeah. Is there a wisdom to the materiality of the universe that is what we would call defect, but really, pointer?
Huh. Um, that's an interesting question. I mean, clearly there is wisdom here. I mean, the whole universe story is nothing but wisdom, because there's so much in it that we humans can learn from. Um, you mentioned the word defect, and what that brings to my mind is this idea, and this touches Brian's thinking as well, is that in the beginning there was this incredible beauty that was ensconced in a certain kind of mathematical symmetry. And the search for the theory of everything is actually nothing more than the search for this symmetry. And I have to tell Brian, because this is so incredible. The shape that I see behind him, the spiral shape, actually reminds me of some of the visualizations that I have seen of the symmetries that people are coming up with for this incredible mathematical structure that was the universe before it got any of its physicality. So that, I mean, talking about coincidences here, there's just so much of that stuff in the story of the universe, where you go back and you think about some of the intuitions that people had thousands of years ago, especially the mystics, and you can see so many parallels in them. Um, but anyway, the point that I was trying to bring is that, you're talking about teacher and defect. So the universe, we know now, from all the research that we have done, that the only way that it could have manifested itself into a physical universe was by breaking those beautiful symmetries. And so that's kind of what I thought about when you said defect. Even the symmetry of matter and antimatter, unless it was broken, there could be no physical universe. And in fact, there are many other such things that one gets into. But yes, in order to have a beauty which is abstract, in order for it to find a physical manifestation so that it can be appreciated in this new, perhaps even an imperfect way, I think that there is wisdom in that as well. I'll stop here. Karen, I'm curious if you have something to add. You muted. You muted, Karen.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful that I came onto this call and got to hear your telling of the story um, in a new way. I have a couple of things to add. One is, Brian, I'm so grateful that you're showing what showed up for you, because I've been imagining Taurus as the structure for some time, and now to actually have a visual of that is wonderful. And I know Dwayne Elgin spoke a lot about Taurus as well as the structure of the universe, but I could never quite see it in a form that, well, I guess I'm ready to see it in a new form. So I'm so grateful to have it behind you. I was thinking about symmetry. And so when you said that, Sarbmeet, I was thinking about how actually the universe requires asymmetry. And you just said
Yes,
that. And
exactly.
evolution requires that things break down. I mean, how else can new emergence come forward?
Exactly.
Except that the old structure doesn't work anymore. And so there's this sense of movement that asymmetry affords us, and how imperfection is actually the only way forward.
Yes.
And I think from a Western perspective, it's like looking for the equation. It's like, well, what if, what if there is a new element that goes beyond the Western sense of beauty, or the Western sense of perfection, that is missing from our being able to actually see how the universe works. But the other thing I wanted to mention, Sarvmeet, is when you were speaking about how humans were thinking about a structured universe that was already here, I want to just bring in that all of the indigenous peoples did have origin stories.
Yes.
And so it was just Western science and the Western scientists who needed to discover a new way forward in our I guess our own silos of what would constitute evidence. We have now found the evidence that enables us to now flow in to all of these other wisdom traditions. Like there's this wonderful coming together now that we are
Yes.
capable of joining up with everyone else, and
Exactly.
offering additional wisdom that can enrich all of our stories. So thank
So
you.
well said, Karen. I love that word that you mentioned, coming together. I mean, to me, the cosmic story is an umbrella that embraces within it all of the cosmic stories of the past. And it gives them a new vitality, in my view, which I hope that will spark something, ignite something in our universe. So true. I'm looking at the time here, and I'm thinking that I do want to have those 5 minutes before we finish up to show Karen's video, because it beautifully complements, I think, the way that I've told the story, but in a way that only a poet can tell. And Kendra is an amazing, amazing poet as well as an artist. So let me position that. And then if there's any more questions, I'm more than happy to do that. So just share my screen, share the sound. Okay, I hope you can see the screen with Kendra's face on there. And if you can't hear the sound or anything like that, please do let me know, so I make sure that it comes through. But here goes.
The Big Bang blows its own horn. 58 years after the fact, I parked outside chained gates, defied no trespassing signs to walk the drive of Bell Labs' abandoned annex. I trudged against New Jersey's December wind up the steep trail of broken asphalt. And there it was, still hugging the peak of Crawford Hill, the highest point on Monmouth County's coastal plain. The Holmdel Horn Antenna, 16 tons of Nobel-enabling aluminum creation. I sat by a plaque citing the accidental detection in 1964 of the near imperceptible thermal bath, photons set free to fly by the first formed atoms. Those original waves of light now flowing through my eyes, wafting through my bones and hands, now soaking the trees, the hill, the dried brambles at the edge of the site, still radiating the remembered breath of hot, dense newness. I imagined an incantatory calling forth by horned deities and their fecund power, companioned by insect ancestors, their feelers alert and sensing. I saw horn amulet adorned healers from every continent riding earth's salt sway, knowing the sacred horn-shaped symbol united eros and agape. The aperture-sensitive pointy end telescoping into the wide open chalice of embrace. For in every direction, the astronomer shamans played the great horn, no matter how they pursed the lips of science to direct the sound, the antenna's penetrating beam echoed as receptacle, a strange, soft, ceaseless hum. That, it turns out, wasn't pigeon dung, but the background to love, laughter, black holes, rhinoceri, and whales' watery oratorio. A haunting, remembered, remembering strain, now performed in microwave. Earth's goose-pimple hill shivered in awareness. Grasses surrounding the small outbuildings spiked to attention. Slim young maples and beeches danced empathic tree glee, while the spongy fungi nodded sagely in the dark mycorrhizal loam of earth, in the root of all things, in the root of all thinging, seeing, feeling, and hearing. Big Bang's ember glow after song, still hissing and floating through every expanding breath of cosmological being, irrefutable at last, duly measured and noted. The song kissed and known by the singing.
Amazing, isn't it? Um, as I said, I'm open to any other questions. One last thing I wanted to add was that this awareness of the significance of the horn antenna, as I'm sure you understand, isn't very widely understood today. There's only a small group of scientists and perhaps folks that are interested in the cosmic story that know about this. But what I'm really excited about is that this awareness is spreading. And this recent incident that I didn't really go into, where a developer wanted to actually dismantle this place and build condominiums on it, has first of all been averted by a group of citizens that really fought for it, and they have actually won and succeeded. But the beauty of this is that through this process, the awareness of the horn antenna has spread a lot, certainly in our community here. There isn't a citizen or a student even who now doesn't know the significance of the horn antenna and why it needs to be protected. So, good things are happening, and that's really, I think, a good way to end this story.
Well, that's so that is such a wonderful way to end, because perhaps if this hadn't happened with the horn antenna, people wouldn't have been awakened, like everything
Yes.
that's happened in the last few years. Wonderful.
Absolutely true.
And I had an aha moment, Sarbmeet, because I've looked at, the universe, and I've written about this, how we're the wisdom of the universe is duplicated in us. And it was just something that, as I got to know about the universe, it felt really fascinating and exciting and wonderful. And just now it reached the point of, well, of course, how couldn't it be? Because we come from the universe. Even though I've been saying that, it's like those two things just merged. So thank you.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So glad. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here.
Sabi Tex has a question.
Yeah, very
Oh, yes,
quick.
Tex. Yes, please go ahead, Tex.
Hello, Sarbmeet. Very quickly. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I caught the end of your presentation, but I was thinking I'm attending the TIAD panel on TIAD Shade, but I'm glad
Yes.
I caught what I caught. And of course, I know about you, and and I mean, just the little I caught with the whole loss of Brian Berman and Tom's comment, and then your comment. I mean, I was feeling like really in awe. But then you ran that video, and it reverberated soulfully. So right now I'm ecstatic. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing it. Yes. Thank you.
You were talking about resurrecting the legacies of the past, a novel understanding being the spark plug to resurrect the other stories of other civilizations. Yeah, and you did that for Tex. He's the point guy. Well done. Thank you so much, Sarbmeet. You are always a gift.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Hasina.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here.